So I just got back from a very short trip, a very, very short trip from the US. And I wanted to talk about it while it's still fresh in my mind because I kind of wanted to talk about what is the differences that I felt between living in America and living in China. So I was only in America for about a week and a half. So I was on the West Coast for a little bit and then I was on the East Coast. So I can't really say too much about, the Midwest or the South. To describe the overall differences between the two countries, I want to use one word that would describe the total experience living in that country. And so for the US, I want to use the word comfortable. While I was back in the US, while I was seeing family and friends and being there, I just felt like the whole vibe of living in America now is about comfort. Okay, it's about being comfortable, and maybe it's always been like that, but you wouldn't be able to describe that until you live outside of the US. And so what do I mean by this? You know, a lot of people, they go to their 9 to 5 job, they drive their car to work and then drive their car back home, usually when it's dark outside, and they're looking forward to, watching their subscriptions, Netflix, Peacock, Disney Plus, whatever. Maybe taking out some organic snack or protein filled snack, lying on their couch with a couple of blankets, and really feeling, comfortable with the environment that they've created for themselves in their own home. They feel comfort, in their cars, driving wherever they got to go, and another thing that I want to describe is the lack of people overall. I mean, if you compare America living in a town, which most people do, probably a small town, versus living in a, mega city in China, you won't see a whole lot of people unless you go to the supermarket, unless you go to, somewhere where that people are already within that area, maybe a main street. Um, there aren't a whole lot of people around. And so people are more isolated, just going back home, being with their family, feeling comfortable in their surroundings, and never having to really interact with, people that they weren't expecting to. Unless, of course, you're in New York City, which I happen to be in New York, and of course, you're going to be still seeing people everywhere, a large, diverse group of people everywhere on the subways, on the street. But for the normal American experience, which I also experienced, it was just very comfortable. I couldn't really describe it as anything else. An usual mundane type of lifestyle that most Americans live is very comfortable. And that also, you know, brings up the whole idea of drug use. And by drug use, I really just want to talk about, weed, marijuana, which has proliferated in America ever since it became legal in most states for recreational use. Um, but a lot of Americans now, or maybe the population that I'm familiar with, is very comfortable smoking weed. And weed is a drug that makes you feel more comfortable, that makes you space out and feel like, everything's okay, makes you feel like you've done enough work for the day and now you're just chilling, you're just vibing, you just want to escape for a little bit. In the words of Frank Ocean, it's a cheap vacation. you know. And it's all very so comfortable. I was in a couple of places in New York. It's like every 5 minutes you can smell weed on the street. And I never experienced that before COVID. But yeah, it's everywhere. And being high all the time, in my opinion, is not very conducive to being productive. But people have their own ways of doing that. Whether they feel productive in certain hours of the day and they just want to chill out and focus on other things, focus on themselves, or simply zone out watching their Netflix subscriptions, watching the newest episode. So after considering, what it's like living in America, being comfortable, when I came back to China, I just instantly felt like, the vibe is more about convenience in China. And this is probably something I've said before in videos and something I'll continue to say. Everything is about convenience in China. And there's a number of reasons for this. The first one being that there are so many people here that things have to be convenient for things to work properly. In America, they're starting to use mobile payment systems, they're starting to use tapping credit cards on public transports, but these things already have existed in China for a long time. And so convenience has always been the factor that has driven Chinese society because there's too many people to move forward. There's too many people who all want to do the same thing at the same time. And if you don't make that process streamlined, if you don't make it more convenient for consumers, then people will go somewhere else or use another service. And so convenience is the word that I will continue to describe China with. But I want to make the distinction between convenience and comfort because I think living in China has made me realize this, this difference, which is that though everything is convenient in China, not everything is necessarily, made to be comfortable. And that comes with the whole idea of, competition within society. People can get the things that they want very conveniently, very quickly, very easily, but there's no lasting sense of comfort that exists when you live in China. One of the reasons is that you're always surrounded by people. In a place that would be totally empty in America, you would probably see like at least 20 to 50 people in the same place in China, in a megacity. And that's just because you live in a city with, more than 10 million people. In Chengdu, it's 20 million people, which is, larger than the size of some countries. And so there is that. There is comparing yourself to the people that is around you, okay? And for some reason, that has always been a point for Chinese people, And the second thing is, the competition that exists. There's always competition between, being able to get the most and get higher levels, higher positions in society, lifting up your family status. These are all concerns that Chinese people have. And so in America, when people are pretty used to keeping to themselves, not very used to comparing themselves to other people because there's an understanding that people can live independently with their own ideas, their own values. In China, everyone shares the same values, shares the same ideas, and there are so many people that there's no lasting sense of being comfortable within society because everything is always moving. It always has to move forward. And because it's always moving forward, that makes a society that is convenient but does not make you feel comfortable being where you are. China is one of the most dynamic and fast-paced and exciting places you could live because things are always rapidly changing, at least in this century. And people are always, contributing something different or something new. But at the same time, I would say the diversity of the products and the things that you can get in America, the food, the snacks, the experiences is much wider range than you could ever get in China. And so overall, the convenience that you can get in China is next level. You have to establish yourself in China, have to have a WeChat and Alipay account and a couple of other things. But after that, your life can be extremely streamlined and you can do and go mostly anywhere you want. And you don't necessarily need a car to get everywhere when you live in a Chinese city. So overall, a lot of Chinese people automatically, without ever knowing much about America or ever visiting America or knowing anyone who's been there, they have this idea that, oh, America is so great. Oh, I want to move to America. I want to have the experience of living in America. For most Chinese people, I would say some people think America is so dangerous because of the gun violence and you know whatnot. But most Chinese people have a positive image of America, and I think it comes from that level of comfort, that level of independence, and that level of not always being in a competitive space that exists compared to China. Honestly, having that level of comfort, feeling comfortable in what you can have, that consumerist idea of selling you something to make you feel better and to, be comfortable, it's good. It's really nice. I felt great being in America, to be honest, and that's where I'm from. Of course, I love my home, but at the same time, with what it's become now, I think it's really turned comfort into but inactivity. People are so comfortable in staying where they are. It kind of makes people not, push forward in trying to achieve more things in their life. You could stay in the same place, you could be in your bedroom, on your computer, just doing the same thing. And of course that happens here. Chinese people are total escapists when it comes to playing, you know, games on their phone or playing mahjong on their phone, and they could do that for hours. They can use TikTok, Douyin for hours, just like Americans can. That all of that exists, but I'm just talking about the overall vibe between the two countries that really struck me. And that's kind of just what I wanted to talk about in this video. If you appreciate the experiences I'm sharing with you about modern China, living here, and, you know, anything that I could share with you, make sure you leave a comment down below. Do you feel the same way? Leave a like on the video, and of course subscribe to the channel. Of course, that always helps. And I love to hear from you, so I will see you in the next video.